Spring 25 for developers. What's coming, what's cool. And while it's Spring 25 for developers, this isn't purely going to be about Apex code and things like that, because there's other things that as developers we need to know about, we need to be aware of, we need to think about. You know, it's not just we sit in our, sadly we don't just sit in our ivory towers or our darkened rooms and write code all day. That would be wonderful though, and if anyone has a job like that, I'd be very interested in it. So I'm Keir Bowden, I'm the Salesforce CTO at Credera, Salesforce partner and a technology agnostic consultancy. Those are my connections. I think I know most of you here, but for those I don't, hello, nice to meet you. So jumping straight in. So this isn't development. This is digital wallet for Agentforce. This is where you can see what you've used in Agentforce.
No way.
How many months have we been asking for this, Will? How many months?
About 6 months.
Yeah. So you get these consumption cards, and it tells you what your total, it gives you a period of time, tells you what your total conversations are, tells you how many you've got remaining, how many you've used, and you can track that. Awesome. Then you've also got a bit of analytics around it, consumption insights. You can see, how have I been consuming? That was obviously a big day. Probably a weekend there, you would think. Big day. Oh, very disappointing day. That's where everything just failed a bit. And then it came back and they were so excited. So this is all the stuff that we've been asking for ages, and this is coming in Spring 25. So not development, but if you're doing anything development related with Agentforce, every customer will be really pleased to see they have this capability.
Keir, can I ask you a quick question?
You can.
Do we need to pay attention to this? Because some of the information from these slides might come up in the quiz later.
You need to pay attention to this because this is gold. That's the first point. And some of this information may be used in a quiz later on to win things that do that. And that is like money in your pocket. So you would definitely want to be paying attention. Some other Agentforce stuff. So for those of us who do development, one of the things we like to do is change things that aren't live in production. And with Agentforce versions, we are going to be able to do that going forward. So you're going to be able to create and test a new version while your existing one is active, rather than having to turn it off, disappoint people, and then turn it back on again. And you can have up to 20 versions of a single agent. What's also great about that is you can go back to an earlier version. And that is something that you often find you have to do when you have a great idea and it doesn't quite pan out. Rather than having to unwind it all manually, you can just drop back to an earlier version. And typically, you can delete the later version. Certainly do that in Prompt Builder. Agent for setup is coming. So this is interesting. This is outside of the users using it. This is the admins and developers getting to use it. It's mainly querying information. It's not about taking action at this point in time. So troubleshooting user access issues. Creating a report type. Awesome. Finding answers in help documentation. And this will be available starting in February 2025. So it won't necessarily be available even if you're an Agentforce customer or if you spin up a dev org or a partner demo org. But it will roll out. But this is interesting because I think it's the first time it's gone away from being a user tool to being an admin tool and actually us being able to do things behind the scenes. And one thing is, you've got these three things at the moment, but that's because these are actions associated with Agentforce, they can just roll them out. So I would expect to see the cadence of that really pick up. This final one, so I haven't put this in because I think everyone spends all day changing omnichannel user configuration, right? That's a relatively rare thing. But this is an action within an agent that allows you to do things like add and remove. And this is a real game changer, I think, change skill levels for users. So you're going and you're changing existing records. It's the first time I can remember the ability to do that being a standard action. So typically when we were doing the Copilot implementations, if you wanted to change records, that was a custom action. So that was all on you. If it went wrong, Salesforce hands clean. Whereas this is one that they're starting to allow us to change things. So again, I think this is probably something that doesn't happen an awful lot, and maybe some people are interested in doing it, but I would expect to see this roll out and to get more and more of these. But I think this is a kind of pivot point, really, probably the best way of describing that. So that's why it's in there. Again, not a developer topic. Sort list by multiple columns. That looks good, doesn't it? There you go. There you go. I didn't think I had any animation in this one, so that was good. So I think this is really cool. So basically, what it allows you to do within a list view, it's the kind of thing you've been able to maybe been out doing reports in the past, but within a list view, you can sort by a column. So in this case, I'm sorting by close date. So you can see I've got the end of last year, obviously, end of July, end of August, into September. So I've sorted by that. But actually within those, just because I've got a bunch of them that close on the 31st of July, doesn't mean I don't really care about the ordering. So within that ordering, I can then sort by amount. Which is why you can see I've got two 31st of July. First one's 20,000, second one's 140,000. And this kind of sorting is really good for allowing you to really drill into this information without having to spin up a report and without having to go to a report, and then you can easily navigate to the records, etc. And you can do this by up to 5 columns, so we've demonstrated 2 there. But a couple of things, this only applies to your user. You can't enforce your sorting preferences on other people, sadly. That'd be good, wouldn't it? Everybody sorts like me. And you can't save it as the default for the same reason that you can't enforce it on everybody else, which again is a shame. But yeah, so I think that's really cool, really cool. Absolutely. Oh, and there's more animation. Who knew? It's almost like I didn't do this deck, and yet I did. Let's see what happens this time. Okay, this is the same thing but related lists basically. So again, you can see here it's sorted by stage initially, and then it's sorted by amount within the stage, as the 1 and the 2 clearly helpfully show. And you can see here, this is what I've configured: sort by stage, sort by amount. So same concept, and I think this is a good indication of how the same code or the same components are used within Salesforce in multiple scenarios. So it's clearly behind the scenes, it's the same functionality that's generating this list of things, which is why they can implement sorting through multiple columns and just roll that out into other areas. So again, I think that's very cool. Permissions, there's a new permission coming. And because of this, view all and modify all are now view all records and modify all records, because there is now a view all fields. So view all fields, if you grant that permission, that views all fields that are currently there and also any fields that get added in the future. So if you know you've got an integration user or something like that, needs to see everything, you don't have to continually go in and remember to add that to a permission set, add that to a user, etc. Important thing, this is viewing all fields of records you can already see. So it doesn't grant you access like view all records and modify all records does. Simply means if you can see any records, you can view all the fields on those. Can't see any records, you're going to see no information whatsoever. So it's not a security hole. Clearly that was something that everybody wanted because we got it. So that's awesome. Very, very short slide, this one. And I say this, I'm bringing this one up again. It's not developer. And it's not really a fantastic change, is it? We've got activities custom fields increased from 100 to 300, as long as you have fewer than 400 million activities. Anybody worried about that limitation? Anybody here? Oh, so if it made it 500 million would have been fine, but 400 million is useless to us. The reason I bring this up is because it's activities and they're getting some love, and that hasn't happened for an awful long time. So it looks like they're starting to be taken a bit more seriously again. I think we're still waiting for them to come into the user interface API so that we can use them nicely within Agentforce, etc. But it's good to see something happening on activities. Again, not developer, but something we should all be pleased about. This is something we should all be pleased about if you work for a large corporation like I do. So the reset password link now supports multiple clicks. So when you get a reset password link, you can click on it, and if you don't go all the way through, you can click on it again. And you might think, well, why would you care about that? So what happens is if you work in a corporate environment, you get this email with your password link, and the security tool goes, oh, there's a link in that email. I'd better follow that. It's fine. It takes me to a password reset page. I can back away at this point in time, send it to the user who clicks on it to be told that link has already been consumed. And you can spend, trust me on this, I have done this, you can spend days trying to get the security team to allow list Salesforce to stop this kind of blocking. And you do all that, and then you find that Outlook does this by default as well, and you have to go and find that setting to stop it. So what happens now is when you click that link, it takes you to this. And it's only when you click that that the link is consumed. So you've got this extra step, which means that security tools following that link isn't going to break your reset. So it's for 24 hours or until the user clicks reset password. You have to turn it on. You should turn it on because it will save you loads of pain. Lightning Web Components. I like this first one. So I didn't know you could save custom components without specifying an API version. But apparently you could. Who knew? So this is prior to Winter 24, and you had this. If you saved it without an API version, behind the scenes, the component was compiled within an internal API version. So that's great, isn't it? We don't know what that internal API version is. Is it the current release? Who knows? Does it change? Who knows? All we know is we've saved something and we have no idea about the behavior of it going forward. So A, probably shouldn't have done that anyway, but B, the fact that you cannot do this now and you have to specify an API version is a really good thing. Not knowing how a component is going to behave when you drop it onto a page is kind of really bad.
How does that affect? So if you already have a component without it and they force it?
So I think it's going to be when you edit it, when it's edited at that point in time, an API version must be specified or it will fail to save. Yeah, it won't. I guess they can't go through. Well, it will just be compiled with the internal API version at the moment, so you're fine. Who knows what that is? Who knows what will or won't work? So then you've all heard of Lightning Web Security, so I'm talking about lighting web security here. I've just realised, so slightly different thing. But basically, with Lightning Web Security, if you've got an iframe in there and you put an explicit source attribute in, that will apply cross-origin restrictions, even if it is the same source that your page has been served from, your component has been served from. So regardless of source. So if you've got that, it is going to be enforced even where you wouldn't think it would be. So just be aware of that. And there is a single, we're back to Lightning component security here, so different concept again. Got a single security guide with Locker and Lightning Web Secure, or Lighting Web Security, one of those anyway. Light something Web Security. But you've got those two things together in a single place, and that's the short link to it. So if you want to know about security, that is the place to go. Local dev is GA for Lightning apps, and I'm going to try and show you it. Hopefully a bit more successfully than I've been doing everything else so far, but we shall see. All right, let me just kill that off from my earlier test, and let me find Chrome. Okay, that looks good.
If you want your slide animations to run as well as Keir's, you can download my free guide on animations to slide decks.
So the way that you do local dev is that you use a plugin to the Salesforce CLI, and you run this command, sf lightning dev app. Then you use -n, local dev is the name of my application. You must have permissions to access that application. It must be explicitly granted. Just because you're an admin and you think you have explicit access, you can access it in the system, but this will error if you haven't granted yourself access via a permission set, as I found out. Probably not, I wouldn't have thought. Oh, look at that, good. Can you read that? This is warp, by the way, so ignore that bit. That's warp being helpful. And it's AI, so let's put that little star against it. But SF Lightning Dev App. So -n local dev is my application that I've created to demonstrate this. It's good that it's got -o. It's figured out that -o zip demo means, do you want to add that again? Just a second time. So let's hit that. So assuming I'm still connected to the Wi-Fi. So it asks me where I want to preview. On my desktop, or do I want to do mobile? So I'm going to do desktop here. And this fires up Chrome. Pull that up. Can you see that? This is my component here, it's right in the corner. Look at that floating in a sea of white space. Let's try and make that a bit bigger. Oh, actually, that might be a bit too big. Make it a bit smaller. Simple component, a little static text. So, not bad, not bad. But I'm a creative guy, so I kind of like to see if I can improve that in some way, shape, or form. So let's go and find VS Code. So this is my simple HTML. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a slightly improved version with a little less text. Because less is slightly smaller than static, so that's why we've got that. So I paste that in, I click Save, go back to Chrome, and that's updated. I haven't deployed, I haven't done anything. That's just updated nicely in the web browser. So I'm a bit more creative than that, in fact. I think I can do better. So what I'm going to do now is have a go. So this is I'm going to change this to a lightning card instead. I'm going to have even less text, a little less, and a few bits and pieces around it to try and make it a bit more interesting. So again, paste that in, save that, back to Chrome, and that's all happened. It's done some nice styling. It's put various bits and pieces in there. So it's done some nice HTML. Doesn't just stop at HTML though. So if I go into my JavaScript behind this and I enable a click handler, I save that, and then I go to my final version of my simple HTML, which you can see here has a lightning button in it. And I copy that. Go back to Chrome. So my button's appeared. That's really good. But also, my JavaScript has been updated. So I click on that, and it shows me that it's clicked the button. So that's awesome. So we never need to deploy again, right? That's all over. So if I exit that and then reload this, oh yeah, we do need to deploy again. None of that's actually gone anywhere. So this is exactly the kind of thing where I would think, great, I've solved that problem, that's all ready to go, that's in version control, I can delete everything, and then we run the next build, and I go, oh wow, that's not what it was at all. So remember that, you're just changing things locally, it's just hitting the UI there. So I think that's very cool, and that's not my deck. Oh, no. Darn it. Hang on. Play from current slide. Where did I get to? There's where I am. Right, so that was the demo. You can't debug in the browser, though. That's the thing. You can't, if it's not working, if you add some JavaScript and it goes wrong, you can't debug in the browser, as Mr. Shisham found out. And he created an idea on the idea exchange. So follow this QR code to that link, and please vote up that idea, because it's really helpful. One of the reasons you're doing local dev is because you don't want to deploy all the time. You don't want to be sending stuff up, pulling it down every time you want to tweak anything, and yet you can't actually debug. And I know, I mean, when I first saw local dev, I thought, well, am I going to use it? And actually, I've found myself using it a bit recently, because generally speaking with these things, I'm not great. Well, I know you can never tell from this, but I'm not the most creative person. So it would take me a few round trips to actually figure out what combination of CSS and HTML, etc., looks really nice. And if you're having to deploy every time you make one minor change, it certainly takes some time. So definitely worth it.
Can it access Salesforce data?
Second?
Can it access Salesforce data?
It can access Salesforce data as long as that code was in there before. If you change the contract and things like that. So it's mainly stuff taking place in the browser. I tend to use it just for styling. Next demo, compressing and extracting zip files in Apex. So I think I talked about this, possibly, I think it was spring 24. It might even have been here a year ago. So that's pretty spooky, isn't it? So let's go and try and find that. Yes, that'll be in there. Find my spring 25 demo app.
You're still sharing your stuff.
What?
There we go.
Rubbish. Right, can we see that right? Cool. So this is my demo page. So I basically uploaded some files into my Salesforce org, and I go and retrieve those, and then I can ask the user to, if they want to inspect them. So it's quite big, isn't it? Should we have a go at that one and see if it works? Yay! So it's gone and inspected it. So 4 meg bite-sized zip file. So I find it's quite useful to figure out how much you're actually consuming as well. So 195 milliseconds of CPU. That's really good to extract that kind of information. If you back in the days of other people's implementations of zip in Salesforce, CPU was typically, heap was troublesome because you had a big file, but CPU was normally a killer as well because there's quite a lot of processing involved in zipping and unzipping. So this is obviously done in a really, really efficient fashion. And I use 4 meg of heap. Because it's literally going to an Apex class which pulls that file, extracts the details from it and sends it back, it is possible to exceed the heap size limit. So heap and CPU are one of those things that is like checked occasionally. It's not checked every time you try and do an operation, so you can briefly beat it as long as you let go of that heap very, very quickly. So thus far, I've got up to, I think, 26 meg out of a 6 meg limit I've been able to get to. But I think if I tried to do anything other than just simply pull that file details and send them back, then it would fail. And obviously, as soon as you go over 6 meg, you're leaving yourself likely to fail. But even so this is one of the things, this is what it can do. It can pull down all the information about all the files within that zip file. It can tell me the mechanism that was used to compress it, what its original size was, and its compressed size. So that's all very cool. So let's have a look at some code. We'll look at the Apex code rather than the Lightning Web Components aren't particularly exciting. But we'll look at the Apex code, and if I take that off of there, move that there, can we see that? So the first one isn't really very interesting. That's just getting the zip files, just pulling them back to a particular file type. But this is how you actually process a zip file. So go and get your content version, and you have to pull the version data. You have to pull the body of it because that's the thing that actually contains the zip. So you then you basically pull that out as a blob. Then you use the compression namespace, and you've got these zip reader, zip writer, zip entry type of classes. So for a reader, I just basically say I want a new zip reader based on the body that I've pulled from that version data, and I say, right, get me the entries, and that's all I have to do in order to expand that zip file, rather than importing loads of different Apex classes, etc., like we've had to do in the past, or send it to the front end in some way and hope that that can handle it and send it back. So this is a real game changer, I think. The amount of these that I've used in my time that have never quite delivered. This probably won't deliver as well because it's still subject to limits and the like, but I think it will get a lot closer. And then I could just wander through for each of these. Zip entry, get name, get method, get compressed size, get uncompressed size. I can pull all that information, and then I just grab the CPU and the heap size and how big the file was, just so I know what's going on. But it's like really simple. You have to do so little now to do this. That's pretty awesome. So I'm going to go back to this hilariously to do one slide. So that was that compress. Evaluate dynamic formulas in Apex is generally available. Again, I think I spoke about this when I was here last year because it was part of Spring 24. So we're going to go back to my Spring 25 demo. I'm going to Formula Tester. So I've seen loads of examples of this where it's like, oh, we'll pull an Apex record and then we'll say, get me this formula that I've predefined before, and then we'll display it, and isn't life wonderful? Oh, that's a bit dull. You don't want to do that over and over again. So I thought what's quite nice is if I can dynamically create a formula, send that back to the server, and just say evaluate that against a record and tell me if it's any good or not. So I built my little formula checker. So I can pick on a particular type of record. I can decide what response I want. Pick a record in here. Hopefully I've got one. Yes, I do. That's good. And I can do things like I'll have the name, a bit of spacing in there, plus the website. And then I hit check, and that comes back, and that's pulled out from the record, and it's done buzzard ink, and it's pulled my website information as well. So that's really quite cool, because it's never seen that before. It doesn't know what record I'm using, and it can still send me that information. So again, let's go and have a look at some code. So formula checker. Again, not an awful lot of code, is there, for what I've done there? So it gets passed in a formula string. That was my name plus a separator plus website. The type of SObject that I want to load into it, the return type of the formula, and the record ID. So I convert my return type into an enum, and then I create my formula instance. I basically just say with type of the SObject type, so in this case it is with the type of an account, with the return type of string, and with the formula that I've sent through there. This, I think, is really cool, because I thought I would have to process that string myself and figure out what fields are in it, but I don't. I can just say the field name list, get me the referenced fields from that formula instance there, so I don't have to look at that string, I don't have to know anything about it, and that will get me the reference field. If I'm following relationships, it will pull all that information in as well. So I just join that into comma separated, and then my query becomes select those fields that I know nothing about and care nothing about from the SObject type that, again, I don't care about, where the ID equals that record ID. So in that case, as you can see, select name, website from account. That's what it will break down to. Then I execute that query to get the record. Then I evaluate the formula, and then I send the formula result back to the front-end user. So I think that so little code to do something like that, I think is awesome. And where I can see this being really helpful, so I don't think formula checkers are going to be hugely used, but where formulas could be really useful, I think, is something like something where you can plug in rules or whatever, like a rules engine. So rather than having to, what I've always tended to do when I create my own rules engines is I effectively write the logic in my own kind of language that I know that I can parse quite easily. And what I can do actually here is I can just have a string that is a formula, and I can evaluate that in Apex to decide whether I execute that rule or not. And I've decoupled everything really nicely. So I think that's very cool as well. Right, so if you want to look at the code behind those, follow that link. I'll be doing a couple of blog posts on those as well, but they're not there yet because I only got it working today. What next? This is an interesting one, I think. So concurrent long-running Apex requests. So if you have a number of Apex requests running at the same time in your org, and you queue up one over the limit, it will kill off one earlier on. And what it always used to be was we all had the same amount. However, now it's going to be license-based. So for every 100 licenses, you'll get one long-running request. The current is 10, so you won't lose out, but spendy customers are going to get the ability to go up to 50, which I think is quite interesting. We've always had the limits around storage space, around API calls and the like being license-based, but most of the other stuff hasn't been. It's interesting that this has come in. I wonder if that's, would be great if you bought like 5,000 licenses and suddenly got like 500 SOQL queries in a transaction. Wouldn't that be brilliant? Probably not going to happen, but still. You can pause and resume scheduled jobs in Apex. Always quite cool. You can create your own kind of custom job handler. And another lovely, surprising one, master detail reparenting restrictions enforced. Well, lovely. Yeah, kind of thought you might do that anyway. But apparently, if you did things in a particular order, even if you'd said don't allow reparenting, reparenting would be allowed. So that was lovely. And Apex no longer supports JSON serialization of exceptions. Didn't actually support it before, but you could do it without getting an exception. You just get bad JSON or incomplete JSON, and now you don't get that at all. So a couple of things that have been made better there, which is nice. This is another good one. The metadata API will error if it is overwhelmed, if it has too many requests. So read metadata and retrieve requests. Only read and retrieve for some reason, not deploying. But this applies to new orgs created in Winter 25 and later. So I guess if it's not created in Winter 25 and later, don't know. Does it not get overwhelmed? Does it not error? Does it just fail silently? We don't know. But what we do know is going forward, new orgs will behave in that way. So be prepared for that. So on to low code rather than pro code. Who's built one of these before? Visual progress indicator for a flow. How far are we through this, right? Probably millions of them out there. Well, it's coming to the platform, so you can retire all that. On a particular screen, you define which stage it is, and then when you're creating a flow, you can say, show a progress indicator, so we don't have to rebuild it all from scratch every single time. So that's very cool. I like that. Flow creation with Einstein is generally available. You do need, unlike the Agentforce for developers, you do need a platform license for Einstein for this. So you either need Einstein for sales, Einstein for service, or Einstein platform. So this, you will be spending quite a lot of money before you see this.
Pointing out that the damn box appears even if you haven't got it.
Does it?
Yeah.
Brilliant. What happens when you click it?
It says it doesn't work well.
Nice. Yeah. So basically, when you are creating one, you can say, give it some instructions, or say, get started with sample instructions. Get started with sample instructions isn't intended to mean you should use those and create a flow and hope it's doing what you want. It's just giving you a clue as to how you should write instructions, so don't think that it's going to give you helpful ones. Summarize flow with Einstein is generally available. So over on Einstein, you can click Summarize Flow, and then I'm not sure how much I like this, because it's very, if you look at the description, it's triggered automatically. It starts by retrieving the case row. It's kind of describing the boxes that you would see on a flow. So this is really helpful for someone who can't read a flow. But I don't know how helpful this is. If you drop this in as your description, I don't know how helpful that's going to be to administrators that come after you or developers that come after you to understand what you're actually trying to do with it. This is giving you the mechanics of it rather than the purpose of it. So you probably don't want to just take this. You may want to use this as I mean, it's going to be enormous on some of these flows you see on the internet, right? These ones which have got about 1,000 boxes and loops and what have you. Be interesting to see what it said about that. Maybe it will start getting snarky, who knows. But yeah, I wouldn't just copy and paste this because it is a bit kind of just follow along. You probably want to give some information about why you're doing it, not just what it's doing. And you can create formulas in Einstein. So when you're entering a formula, you've got this lovely little star thing here. Put some information there. You can insert resources if you need to. And then once you've done that, this is the bit that I actually really like. And again, because I'm quite snarky. So it generates a formula, and then you can go and check it. See if you got it right. And it's like a bit too much to do that final step for itself, wouldn't it? And just say, I have generated you a formula that is valid. Now I've generated you something. You go and figure out whether you want to use that or not. Nice. And the flow builder transform element. The flow builder transform element allows you to join two collections. So transform is maybe doing a bit of heavy lifting. What I would say, though, is I think the transform element is probably going to do lots of other things apart from this in the future. It's not just going to stay doing this. But you define how you want to join, what the key is, how you connect those things together, what fields you want in there. So that, really useful new feature in Flow, I think, something like that. But I would see that as getting more and more powerful as time goes on. And these kind of things always slightly surprise me because they're like, if you come from a development background, they're so obvious that you want to do this. And then you're like, oh, you can't do that there? Oh, right, oh. So this is basically when you're querying something, when you're doing get records, you can say how many you want. So it's not one or everything. And that might not seem like a big deal, but I've worked on orgs where we've written code 7 or 8 years before, and then suddenly they phone up and say, oh, we're getting this error. And it's like because it's trying to query 4,500 and do something with them, and we never thought they would actually create that many, but over time, those things happen. So again, very helpful. Finally, a beta feature, SLDS2, the new design system. Ooh, curvy. Ooh. So this is coming. You'll be able to create custom themes, etc., off the back of that. Don't know too much about it at the moment, but if you have this, I've yet to find an org with this, and I've spun up all sorts of Salesforce demo orgs. Turn on an enhanced Lightning user interface. If you have that, then you will be able to get SLDS2 and create your own themes. It's something that I'm not sure is actually in many editions at this moment in time because Spring 25 isn't live yet. That brings me to the end of Spring 25 for developers. But if you're interested in the rest of Spring 25, probably the bit less snark as well, because I'm talking to customers then, so I have to be a bit more sensible. I do a release webinar for Credera for every release. So if you want to sign up to that and come and hear more about things, and it also gets recorded and put on YouTube, and you get links to all that. Thank you very much. Any questions? Peter.
One of the things I was with the dynamic formula eval was we're used to formulas that reference fields and objects for the org to know about those references. And here, there is no such reference now because it's dynamic. And is that something that you've thought about, or like what the
So is this in terms of like when you're building that formula, you know that you're only using fields and records that actually exist within there, fields and objects that exist within there?
Once the formula exists, if you go and try and change the API name of that field,
right, okay. Yeah, no,
you could have formulas that are using that field, and you can still change that.
Absolutely, and that's exactly when I was saying about having a rules engine or something like that with a formula that dictates whether you apply that rule or not. Absolutely, if you change that, it would error. And I don't think there's really anything we can do about that because there's no way of being able to insert ourselves into an admin operation like changing a name or changing an API, and there's no triggers or anything like that. I guess the only thing you could do is have that kind of check as part of your continuous integration type work that goes on. Part of your pipeline, maybe scan for things, and a CLI plugin that scans for that kind of thing, scans for those changes. But yeah, that probably wouldn't be a simple thing to build, I think.
No.
It's a good point, though.
It's just a risk to be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Summarize flow with Einstein.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried it for a very big flow, and if yes, how accurate are the results?
Sorry, so...
The summarize
Yeah.
with Einstein feature, right? Where
Yep.
summarize gives you the text what the
Yeah, absolutely. And it describes this, it does this, it gets a record, it finds a field. Yeah.
Assuming if it's a small flow, it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see what if it's one of those.
Yeah, I mean that's something because I haven't had access to that. That's just a rip off of the release notes. It'll be interesting to see what it does, whether it tops out, because it may be that there's too much information going into the request, and unless it's using a Gemini, it'll have a limited window of information that it can send to it, and also how useful that's going to be on a very large flow. Yeah. It's. I mean, I guess any description is better than no description, especially as this stuff is all being used by AI in order to make decisions, etc. But it is quite. There's a great cartoon of I hate editing other people's code, and there's a sign with a comment on it saying this is bridge, and there's a bridge in front of them, and it's like, well, that's a really helpful comment, and I kind of find it a bit like that. It's basically pointing at a bridge, going, yeah, that's a bridge. Well, okay, and I think that's the thing. This can give you some information about it, but it's not going to get you the why, because it doesn't know why you did it. It doesn't know what its purpose is.
Because when you use that Agentforce extension for the Apex code debugging, right, it works well for low to medium complexity. But when it goes to super large, it just stops in between.
Yeah.
What is the feedback given?
Yeah, absolutely. I would expect it to be much the same as well. I mean, it's a fairly standard thing with LLMs that as soon as you get into complexity and lots of things for it to consider, the quality of responses starts to lower. For sure. Yes?
Beginning of your presentation, you mentioned that after a long time, the event object is going to get some love.
Yeah.
Do you have some more details on that?
So on this one, basically the activities, the tasks, the events and tasks, the activities object really hasn't had any love for an awful long time. Everything that happens to standard objects is like, oh, we couldn't do that because that's a polymorphic object. It can have two distinctly different forms, so it's all a bit more complicated. And this is one of when Will and I were doing the Copilot rollout, this is one of the things we hit, was that the user interface API, so Einstein doesn't support activities because it's not supported by that API. And the fact that we're now seeing some changes coming into activities does indicate they're starting to actually do some things with it, which hopefully is coming off the back of needing to support this for Einstein and getting it into the user interface API, etc. So I'm hoping this is the start of them becoming more of a first-class citizen and less of a forgotten. Will?
Yeah, I was going to say, the additional fields on activities, is there any new field types available, or is it just still the same?
I don't think the release notes actually went into that detail. I think so. I would imagine it's the same field types you had before,
So you don't have
just
long text fields?
3 times as many of them. Long text fields with 400 million, maybe that's the limit, eh? 130k times 400 million. Cool. Well, thank you very much, everyone.